hear me clearly? Okay. Well, in the opening of my presentation, I just would like to thank the organizers for this majestic event, and also my chair and the organizer of the panel, Verizar Sadowski, for allowing me to share my ideas with you today. So as you already noticed from my title, this presentation deals with the figure of the Vedic bhus. I'm sure you're all very familiar with them. As you know, in the Rigveda, the bhus, as also summarized by MacDonald, are among the mythical beings not regarded as having their divine nature fully and originally. And as you also know, they're occasionally mentioned as the three sons of Sudanvan, and some hymns also preserve their individual names like Rebu or Rebukshan, Vaja, and Vibvan. A distinctive characteristic of them is that their skills are incomparable or not to be measured. So indeed, the bhus in the Rigveda are connected, as you know, to 5 major miracles or deeds. The first one is the creation of 4 cups out of a single cup, so also referred to as somehow a multiplication of cups, which the first cup belonged to Tvashtar. So here I always provide one example for each miracle, but of course we have this in different hymns, sometimes to the bhus, sometimes also to the bhus and other deities. Here you can see a sort of interaction between the bhus and Tvashtar. Sorry, all my texts are transliterated, the Vedic one, but also the Greek ones, so just to be fair to each. Okay, the second miracle, or actually creation, is the building of a chariot, which is occasionally identified as the chariot of the Ashvins. And so you have an example on this slide. The third one is the creation or building or fashioning of Indra's fellow bay horses, which was also mentioned in the previous passages. Sometimes we have cumulative mentions of the miracles, of course, but you find an example here, those who fashioned for Indra would mind the 2 fellow bays. Yeah. Then there is another miracle which has to do with a cow. So to put it in Raritan's terms, the bhus did something with or to a cow. It is actually not very clear what this is. Some people think it's some kind of milking, but we find actually different verbs. Here you find a verb carve, but elsewhere we find sar, so something like making flow. So sometimes this is connected also with the production of milk by some interpreters. And finally, the bhus are said to have rejuvenated their parents. We don't know who their parents are. This is also a debated matter. Now, different than what happens to other craftsmen names, above all Tvashtar, the name Rebu is not etymologically connected with the root which means to make or to carve, synchronically I would say, but synchronically Rebu came to mean craftsman. In fact, we find sometimes like a Rebu, Rabuna in the Rigveda. Then we can talk about the etymology, but to make a counterexample, Tvashtar, for example, is connected with the root reconstructed as dwerk, which means to carve. So, carver. As already anticipated in the beginning of my talk, the deeds of the bhus allow them to reach immortality, and in fact, this attainment of immortality seems to be connected and associated with their works or labors, but also with their permanence. So here we have works or labors, with their permanence at Agoyas. And then Agoyas, by name the unconcealable, we actually don't know who Agoya is. Some candidates for the identification are sun deities or light deities. Some people think Savitra, usually. But yeah, we're not really sure. Before moving on, I would also like to stop on one thing, which is some features that the bhus seem to have in common with other deities, which are more than one, and are the Ashvins. One major deed they share is the rejuvenation. In fact, we learned from the Rigveda that the Ashvins too performed one rejuvenation on Chavana, then called Chavana in later sources. And furthermore, this miracle, not in the Rigveda explicitly, but in the Vedic prose, and here you find Jaiminia Brahmana in Kalan's edition, seems to be connected with the obtainance of immortality, actually not immortality, but with the soma share by the Ashvins. So the story goes that the Ashvins approach Chavana's wife, who is young and beautiful, and somehow she obtains that they rejuvenate her husband, and after doing something, usually emerging into a pool and then coming out, Chavana is rejuvenated, and then he reveals, so I'm just summarizing the main traits of, we actually have many versions, but these are the main events. Chavana obtains, makes that so that the Ashvins obtain a share of soma. And here's just a dialogue in which Sukanya points out the problem of the Ashvins in this story. The problem is that they are incomplete because they do not take part to the soma ritual. In other accounts in the Mahabharata, it is cleared up that they are incomplete because they spend too much time with the man. So this makes them somehow not, incomplete or not worthy of soma. But after doing the rejuvenation deed, they reach immortality. So one thing I wanted to point out is that Ashvins and the Rebus seems to share this rejuvenation deed. And I didn't show it in my slides, but this is also described in the same way. So with the same phraseology in the Rigveda, they obtain somehow the portion of the soma after. So this rejuvenation is connected in both cases in the Rebus together with other miracles to obtaining something. And also, I also looked up for other features they share. I would say the number 3, because 3 seems to be the Ashvins, forgive me for saying this, that's favorite number, because we have some hymns which repeat, speaking about repetition, the word 3 in almost every stanza. The rebus are 3 in number. And finally, there is also one interaction between the Ashvins and the rebus, because as I said before, the rebus build a chariot which is often identified as the chariot of the Ashvins, and I put an example here. There is actually a further common trait they share, and it's what I call a taksh composition. A taksh composition is a ring composition in which that features the repetition of the verb taksh. The first taksh mentioned is the rejuvenation deed, and the second taksh could be a metapoetic reference or the fashioning of other different types of things. So now, since this presentation is rebucentric, I will give you one example of what I mean. This is a short hymn, just 2 stanzas from a hymn to the rebus. Stanza 9 is the final one, but you can see that in the begin proximity you have the reference to the rejuvenation with the verb taksh, and then there are other repetitions of taksh, but also they form pattern in the hymn. But in the final stanza, taksh is used to say fashion glory, which is an interesting thing. Yeah, they fashion something which is not, so to say, concrete. It's an abstract thing. Okay, now let's move on. In a 2012 renowned article, Joel Brereton proposed that the rebus inventions encode the acts of the soma ritual, and more precisely the acts of the third soma pressing. More specifically, he connects the fashioning of 4 cups with a detail of the third soma pressing, the creation of the chariot with the journey, the chariot with the ritual for the Ashvins or the hymns. The creation of the fellow base with the detail of the Yajna Pucha, the creation of the cow with maybe the pressing, and then the rejuvenation is very difficult to explain. He proposed, if I remember correctly, 2 options. One is the rejuvenated parents are the Ashvins, because the Ashvins are said to be invoked as as parents, actually, in some hymns, or as providing fertility to the worshipper and his wife. If this reconstruction is correct, the rebus reached immortality because they were priests, and as a matter of fact, they are further associated with poetic activity elsewhere. In fact, they're said to have fashioned for Agni their formulation. Incidentally, let me also point out that the presence of the hymns to the rebus is in the Rigveda is a concrete manifestation of the fact that they at least achieved long life through poetry, if almost more than 3,000 years after the composition, we are still talking about them. And now, in what follows, I will try to point out parallels from other Indo-European languages for the combination of the idea of fashioning and the idea of drink. I will provide you with examples in which we have a verb for fashioning and a substance, which is a drink or something that you can drink, and which could be a ritual drink or a poetic drink. Okay. The first evidence which we could find, first searched into the Avesta, and in Yasnaten we have, this is a celebration of the Ahoma, and just to give you an idea of this hymn, I just provide you with two stanzas, one at the beginning and one in the end, in which we have obviously the repetition of the word Haoma in ring composition, if you want, but Haoma actually is repeated throughout, so I'm not really sure this is a ring composition. We have but a parallelism between the beginning and the end. At stanza 10, actually, there is a reference to someone who has Haoma was fashioned tash by a hero who performs the good work, Huapa. Tash is the Avestan equivalent of Vedic Taksh, as you obviously know. Avestan Huapas, in turn, is connected with the Suapas and also Suapasya, which can be told of carvers deity, carvers or fashioners in the Vedic ritual, including the Rebu, actually. In Avestan 2, there seems to be at least one mention, as far as I can tell, of the phraseology to fashion ritual drink. Let's now move to other. The ritual drink, by the way, is also said to have been brought by falcon or falcons, actually, or actually birds. We will return on this. This is just not super relevant now. It will make sense in the end, maybe. This very phraseology, carving a poetic or a ritual drink, is actually paralleled also in the Rigveda itself. In fact, we have in Rigveda 1:117, Tvashtars Madhu, which probably is a canning, so a compact metaphor for poetry. And Tvashtar, as I already said, goes back to this root twerk, according to the recent analysis of Riccardo Ginevra, and Tvastar's Madhu could be interpreted as the carver's Madhu. Analogous expressions are actually attested also in another tradition, Old Norse. In Old Norse, we have kennings for poetry, which are dvergadrekku or dvergadrukku, the drink of dwarfs. The word for dwarf, however, goes back to the very same root, twerk. So dvergadrekku and dvergadrukku can be compared, as shown by Ginevra again, to Tvashtar's Madhu. In Old Norse, we also have reference to a myth which is summarized by the kenning. The dwarfs Fjalar and Galar had killed sage Quasir and made his blood run into two vats and a kettle, and then they blended it with mjod, which is Old Norse for Madhu, from the phonological point of view, at least, or related word. So to obtain a drink that would have made wise or poet, whoever would have drank it. And, okay, now, in the light of all this, let's now go back to the rebus. This is a hymn, Rigveda 10:144, which is dedicated to Indra, and Indra is invited to drink the soma, as you can see in the first stanza. Within the hymn, there is a reference to the Akavya Rebu, who is a poetic craftsman in poetic art. This is Jamison and Brereton's translation, who brings or presents the ritual drink. The ritual drink itself is said to display pearls on the top, so it's probably, which is identified as foam by Jamieson and Brereton, and is also said, of course, to have been brought by the falcon from far away. The hymn, as you may expect, also ends with a ring composition. So maybe you may recall the falcon and the making of the drink, which I mentioned before with the Avesten. Just the points I want to highlight. Once again, ring composition with the word for drop. Then we have the poetic craftsman who bears the soma, the drink's foam, and the birds of prey makes an appearance. We also read that it comes from afar and carries its prey in its talons. Of course, we may refer for this myth of the bird carrying the poetic drink to the analysis of Dumézil in comparative perspective, if you want. Now I would like to show you one Greek comparandum, Pindar's Nemean 3. The Nemean 3 is an ode that Pindar wrote for a winner called Aristocleidas of Aegina for his victory in the pancration, a combat sport, in a Panhellenic Games held at Nemea. The date of the poem is uncertain, but it's 5th century BCE, 470, 460, roughly. The end of these are the final verses, ends like this. Enjoy, a friend, I send you honey mixed with milk, stirred from crowns a drink to sing on, accompanied by the Aeolian breaths of pipes, late though it be. Swift is the eagle among the birds, which suddenly seizes at it, searches from afar the blooded prey in its talons. Now, basically, all the elements that I've already mentioned in connection with Rigveda 10:144 are there, except the poetic fashioners, apparently. But the poetic fashioners are there because in Nemean 3 has a ring composition built with the repetition of several words between beginning and end, and one of these words is meli, the word for honey. In fact, meli applies to the work of the performers who are called tektones. We read, by this opium water are waiting the craftsmen of honey voice revels, young men who seek your voice, the voice of the muse. Different deeds thirst for different things, but victory in games of songs most of all, the fittest companion for crowns and achievements. So the term tektones here applies to the performers, but is definitely there. And here we have a ring composition with the theme of drinking, again. The craftsmen of the drink to sing on, which are the poetic craftsmen, the drink's foam, and the bird of prey also makes an appearance. So to sum up, the common traits that we can find are, I compared Rigveda, we have ring composition, we have different words, of course. The theme of drinking in ring composition, which we also had actually in Yasna 10. In Pindar, the poetic craftsman, Rebu, Meligaru, and Tektones, and Meli in ring composition 2 and Tatash. And we have the drink's foam in Rigveda and Pindar at least, and the birds of prey, Rigveda, Pindar, and Yasna 10. Yeah, okay, send it to you later. I have to move on, I'm late. Let's now stop on feature B. I said before that Rebu does not contain obviously the root tek, but the tek root takshan is found in connection with the description of their miracles. So we could reconstruct this link between the rebus and the tektones in Greek combinatorily. And we also have tash in Avestan. Okay, besides ritual drink and poetic drink, final question. Is there something else that all these craftsmen are producing with the rituals and with poetry? My answer to this question would be yes, they actually produce glory, because as I pointed out to you in the hymn I quoted before, we have this collocation Shravo Tataksha. So you, through the performance of the ritual, you fashion glory for the ritual performance and for the patron. And in the case of Pindar, you also fashion you fashion the glory of the laudandi, of the people you are praising in the Epinician song, thanks to the skilled work of the constructors of verses, who are the poets. And also you can add also the poetic performers, the tectones, who perform the song on different occasions. In conclusion, I tried to support with this long presentation Brereton's hypothesis with some comparative evidence. The myths of, if the myths of the rebus encode acts of the somopressing, we could at least try to compare what they do with some phraseology we find in Avestan, where the ritual drink or the ritual substance haoma is said to be tashed, verb also used for the rebus, but for different objects, not the drink. We have observed some parallels in the Scandinavian myths of the dwarfs and kennings for poetry. And I also pointed out a new parallel with Pindar's Nemean 3, in which we have the word tectones in connection with the fashioning of a drink to sing on. In the end, my conclusions would be that this act of tashing or tektainestai or tashing in Avestan, whatever you want, tektainestai in Greek, leads to seem to be connected with so the fashioning of something which is glory and immortality for the performers in at least 2 or maybe 3 Indo-European traditions. On this very note, and apologizing for the little delay, I see 22 minutes, I thank you for your attention and I conclude my presentation.